This video is produced for the residents of Craig Bay Estates to help inform and educate on subjects that are part of living in this community.
Who was asking about Athol?
Me, that was me, I found him.
Each spring and fall, a group of Craig Bay residents gather at the community clubhouse. Together, they form a volunteer workforce known as the Wednesday Morning Project Group.
So I thought that was the only problem.
Over the next several hours, they'll gather their tools and spread out in separate teams to tackle some of the ongoing maintenance projects in Craig Bay Estates.
See you back here around 11.
Everything from repairing the network of underground sprinkler systems to bushwhacking and trail clearing. One group has its own special challenge. Known as the Pond Group, their job is to look after the network of ponds and waterways within the 43-hectare footprint of Craig Bay Estates. The ponds provide a postcard-perfect background to the rolling hills and trails that make up the green spaces within Craig Bay. Yet they are much more purposeful. The ponds are part of a network designed to prevent overland flooding during times of heavy rain events. They intercept and hold back stormwater that flows through the downhill slopes of the development and settle out any debris and silt. This network of ponds and channels effectively controls the flow of water down the slope until reaching the final outlet that empties into the ocean on the shore of Craig Bay.
And we need guys on the shore.
The Pond Group is headed up by a veteran volunteer who has been working on this project for the past 17 years.
We're going to be down on the Narrows plenty.
During that time, Wally Chin has come to know the intricacies of this watery network. He's a volunteer homeowner like everyone else on his crew. Over time, he has taken on the huge responsibility as caretaker of the ponds.
So I moved to Craig Bay January of 2007, and it was around 2009 when our property manager recognized that we needed to be looking forward to maintaining these ponds. And I must have been walking past his office door at the wrong time, but anyway, he called me in and asked if I would start spearheading a look at long-term maintenance for these ponds. The ponds were getting to be in pretty rough shape in a lot of areas. They were really becoming ingrown with cattails, with algae, all those types of things. And we recognized that if we don't do something quick, we're going to have a problem, because the natural evolution is to go from the natural state to marsh, to swamp, to a bog, and we couldn't afford to have that happen. So it was necessary to get in and find out, okay, where are weak spots in the ponds, and then start a rigorous maintenance program from there. So the main reason that we have to keep the ponds cleared is that we need that surface area to act as a sort of as a buffer for major stormwater events that come into the community. We only have the one outfall channel carrying water to the ocean, but we have about 10 or 12 inflow stormwater situations. So we need to be able to hold that stormwater, and the only way we can do that is have a broad enough area. And if that gets closed in by vegetative growth, then we lose that capacity, and then the next thing we're on the verge of having some flooding taking place. So that's the main thing. We're trying to avoid the flooding by keeping the ponds wide open.
We got to remember that all the water that flows or falls on to Craig Bay in the form of precipitation has to go somewhere, and most of it doesn't go in the ground. It ends up on the hard surfaces, the roofs and so on, eventually flowing into the ponds itself. When this development was first put in place, we were interfering with the normal drainage pattern that was taking place. So therefore, there was an agreement with the city that we had to provide some kind of ways and means to handle that off-site water. And that's generally speaking what is happening in terms of a lot of the pipelines and that come from Northwest Bay Road and actually run right down Langara here and empty into the underneath the Langara Bridge. So a lot of people would wonder, why do we have to handle all this city water? Well, the reason being is because in the building of this complex, we interfered with the normal drainage patterns, and therefore they had to compensate for that somehow.
A little over 30 years, have passed since ground was broken for construction of Craig Bay Estates. Today, the development encompasses 426 homes, a community clubhouse and recreation center, spread across 43 hectares of land fronting the seashore of Craig Bay. By early 2012, an entirely new issue was emerging that would soon challenge the resources of the community. The lower ponds were becoming completely overgrown, with cattails and other aquatic species. Why this was happening, and what could be done to stop it, became a preoccupation for Wally Chin and his pond group.
Well, in the main lower pond, it was the one that was the most congested. The main reason for that is because when that stretch of the pond had been constructed, it hadn't been built or dug deep enough. And so with all the shallowness of it, cattails were allowed just to move forward as much as they could. So we had to first get those cattails cut back and find a way then to deepen this to prevent the cattails from moving further. So that was a similar concept all the way along where we had major problems.
In 2015, with a detailed report from the engineers on the condition of the pond, and a proposal on how to proceed, they presented the plan to the Craig Bay community.
And once we got that report, we asked them to then come up with some detailed design suggestions and recommendations as to how to move forward with excavation and similar type activities. So once we put all the pieces together, the community jumped on board and said, let's go for it. And so 2017, we started on our first phase.
The scale of the rehabilitation plan was huge, and would also be very costly. They needed a manager to work with the contractor, and once again Wally Chin and his pond group volunteered to take on the challenge. To deepen the pond, they would have to drain section by section, using coffer dams to hold back the water. Then, the heavy equipment was brought in. Excavators, trucks and pumps, often working in homeowners' backyards. For each section, the contractor had to dig down, and in some areas, widen the ponds and then build temporary roads to haul away the tailings. This was a massive, 3-year operation, starting in 2017 until completion in the fall of 2019.
All in all, with everything that we had to do, studies, reports, environmental, archaeological, all those kinds of things, we probably spent close to $350,000 as a community.
With the winter rains, the pond slowly refilled, but now with broader banks and a much deeper capacity to hold back storm runoff.
Anybody that was living in Craig Bay here would certainly know what the condition, what the ponds were like then. And if they saw them now, I mean, it's a huge difference. Newer residents coming in obviously would recognize that because it's improved so much since 2019 when the last phase was done. But yeah, it's a phenomenal change from the congestion and the problems we had back in the, by 2010, 2012 for sure.
These freshwater ponds provide an ideal growth medium for aquatic plants, especially during the warm summer months. Invasive species like water lilies, Eurasian milfoil, and yellow floating heart are fast growers that spread across the pond's surface and choke the shoreline. Without the laborious effort of hacking and cutting and raking, the pond's surfaces would soon be overgrown by the rapid growth of the aquatic plants.
So the Ministry of Forest was responsible for managing invasive plants on Crown public land, and then everything else to do with
Becky Brown, from British Columbia's Department of Forestry, has come to meet with the team and have a first-hand look at the Craig Bay pond system. Her department is interested in developing new treatment protocols for invasive aquatic plants, and Craig Bay may be an ideal test site.
We still have to do regular maintenance work on the ponds because nature doesn't rest. Fortunately, because of deepening the ponds as we did, we don't have the cattail incursion problem anymore because the cattails won't grow in water that's much more than a meter deep, and so there's a natural limit how far they will proceed. We have a lot of other aquatic vegetation that's invaded the ponds. Once they're in there, trying to get rid of them is a whole major task.
Without my waders, what
There may be more effective products available in the future as government agencies approve treatment protocols. But for now, the group will continue using what has worked in the past. Chris Job, the owner of Clear Lake Solutions, has been working with Wally on the ponds for the past 5 years.
We've identified the invasive plants, basically as in the past. We've got Eurasian water milfoil, a lot of it in this one.
We're now using our herbicide application on all what we call our 6 pond areas. We apply herbicide Diquat, comes under the brand name Reward, and it is very effective in controlling such things as the yellow floating heart and milfoil.
It's one of 3 Health Canada approved herbicides for use in aquatic systems. It's got a half-life of 1 day, which means within 1 day it's diminished to 50% of its strength. After 2, another 50, 3, etc. It falls through the water and bonds inertly with the sediment in the bottom of the pond. It's a contact herbicide, so when it hits, not everything, but with the floating heart and the milfoil, when it contacts that, they die, and you've seen it within a couple days. They're done.
Quick.
The herbicide targets a broad spectrum of invasive plants, but does not harm the other naturally occurring plants or the animals that inhabit the pond waters. Within 24 hours after spraying, the biocide becomes non-toxic, but its effect on the plants choking the ponds is dramatic. After treatment, the yellow floating heart dies off within days.
Yellow floating heart was our primary target. For some reason, this little pond here that hasn't had much in the past is just full. For whatever reason, it's shown up here. The stuff moves with the birds and the geese and ducks and so on and so forth.
Post-treatment, this small pond illustrates how effective the biocide is at controlling invasive species like floating yellow heart. Within a week, the growth covering the surface of the pond starts to die off and sink to the bottom and biodegrade. A consultant for the Department of Forestry surveys the ponds and creates a technical analysis of what has occurred following the spraying. These reports will help the government agencies determine the future of biocide treatment programs.
We still have some patchiness of some new varieties of things that are showing up. We haven't got chemicals yet that may handle it, but we're working on it, and apparently the provincial government is also looking at some of this invasive stuff and how to control it as well. So we look forward to what comes down the road here in the future.
The long days of summer sunlight speed up the growth of another invader. Commonly called pond scum, various types of algae form into clumps on the pond's surface. If left untreated, this brightly colored algae can spread rapidly, threatening the survival of the pond's ecosystem. Fortunately, there is a natural solution.
This is a microbiotic enzyme. Basically, it's 250 grams in each of these little packets. Little tiny wee critters called in bacteria form that help to control the algae. Basically, what it does is it starves the algae of nutrient material. And we throw a prescribed amount into the ponds every month, and altogether through all the ponds we probably every month put in about 7 kilograms worth of this material. And this little packet here alone probably is worth about $70 in itself, but very effective for the work we're trying to do in terms of controlling the algae. A lot of people will be watching me as we're going along and throwing these little baggies out into the pond and wondering, just what am I up to, or what are these guys up to, because I have fellows helping me as well. But every month we're out here treating the ponds with a special algicide material, which is a microbiotic enzyme, to help control the algae. It just works on the algae, but we've been using it for about 12 years now. It's worked really well in controlling the algae. Algae was the first thing that we had success with, because we could treat it with this material. If we didn't go after the algae, it would then eventually just turn into a quagmire, a swamp, disgusting. And before we got on this, people could even smell the odor from the algae during the hot summer periods. So this has been extremely valuable to us and extremely successful. And it's organic, it's natural, so it's not chemical or anything to that effect. So it has worked really well.
With the regular use of the enzyme, the algae growth has been reduced to a more manageable level. The combination of the physical effort clearing the ponds, the application with biocide, and the aquabiotic enzyme treatment, all work together to keep the invading species at bay. After 2 years of consultations with the Ministry of Forests, a new treatment plan is now set to begin in summer of 2025. This test project will be carried out by the Ministry's Invasive Species Section, who will take on the responsibility, and importantly, the cost, of treating the ponds with a newly approved herbicide. The rehabilitation work on the lower pond left some of the shoreline exposed. To counter this, the pond group has been transplanting cattails back into the water, with the hope that they'll fill in along the shoreline and help stop the banks from eroding.
There's quite a few areas where we've noticed when the growth is removed, cattails removed, then the banks start to slough. A lot of people like to clear off the shoreline and that, and the next thing you know, the shoreline is moving into the yard area. So anything that we can do to stimulate the growth is so much the better.
I think you got two for the price of one here.
That's excellent. That's good.
The cattails help to stabilize the banks and filter any runoff water entering the ponds. As an added bonus, they also provide a barrier to Canada geese trying to reach homeowners' back lawns. Over time, they hope their efforts to repopulate the barren areas will pay off, and eventually merge with the existing cattails that protect the lower shoreline. By late fall, the water level in the pond is rising from recent rainfall. It's time to check the weir and sluice gate that controls the flow of water leaving the pond to reach the ocean outlet.
All the water that comes down from Craig Bay into the ponds after it's all settled out all comes through here, through this weir, makes its way to the ocean. But in the wintertime, we got to get this sluice gate opened up so that we can lower the pond level to give us a little bit of flooding protection, buffering during the wintertime for any of those massive storms that come through, the atmospheric rivers, etc., etc. So
the entire drainage system of Craig Bay comes down to this one outlet. After following the maze of channels and drains connecting the upper ponds down to the lower ponds, the water enters its final channel, a rock-lined passage that leads to the ocean. And finally, what emerges is clean, filtered fresh water that flows into the pristine shoreline of Craig Bay.
but for those of you who do love getting in the water,
We'll see what next year brings, and then we'll see what the next year brings after that. So to guess how long we can keep it up, hard to say. I mean, most of our crew is averaging 76 years of age, so can't keep doing this forever. So, but we got to keep these ponds going forever. It seems like today a lot of the newcomers coming in, not all, but a lot of newcomers are coming in, are looking for something that's a little bit more laid back. They want to be involved particularly at that level. So I know the Wednesday Morning Project Group is always striving, looking for new members to come, and we keep getting some new members, but they're not necessarily young members that can take some of those physical demands. That's the challenge. So.
This video is dedicated to all the volunteers, past and present, that have made the Wednesday Morning Project Group so vital to the success of our Craig Bay community.